Hi, I'm Ron Meyer, the Family First Coach, and welcome back to Coaching the True U's video training series, Stop Tantrums in Their Tracks. 3 simple strategies to get your kids to quit acting out. This is the 3rd segment in the series, and it's going to focus on communicate. Now, last time we talked about engage, and hopefully not only did you have a chance to view the video, but you've had a chance to use some of those tools that we discussed so that you can experience what it's like to be more engaged physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually with your family. Just remember, be patient with yourself and with your family, because these are skills. And like all skills, they take time and practice. Sometimes you may find out that it's a little uncomfortable, but that's okay too, because that's how we grow, by stepping outside of our comfort zone. As you grow and continue to develop these skills, not only will they become easier and just a natural part of your parenting, but you will gain confidence in yourself as a parent, which is going to create more peace within you and your whole house. Imagine how great it'll feel in developing that special relationship that you have with your family, one that only you can provide. So let's get started with the 3rd segment of this series on communicate. As we've seen, there are steps that we can take in order to create more peace in your house, which results in happier kids who don't need to act out in order to get what they want. To do that, we need to be able to connect, engage, and communicate with them. Connecting and engaging with them will help create a unique bond with your family that will simplify your life and create more energy to do the things you enjoy. One of the key components to connecting and engaging with your family is to be able to communicate. But before we do that, let's do a quick review of our last video on engage. In talking about engage, we discussed the 4 areas of engagement. So let's do a quick review. In order to be engaged physically, we need to take time to make time to be there. It's so important because the kids, they may not acknowledge it, but they do notice it, and they do really appreciate it. To engage mentally, you get the opportunity to learn and grow with your family. And the best part is, it's on topics that you want them to focus on, not just things that they see on TV or hear on the radio. Being emotionally engaged with your family will allow you to help them get in touch with their feelings. And increasing their emotional intelligence will allow them to deal with difficult situations a lot easier. And finally, engaging spiritually is a great gift to your child, not to mention to yourself as well. Being a part of their journey and them being a part of your journey will not only benefit each of you individually, but imagine what that will do for the overall health of your household. So those are the 4 areas we talked about engage. Now, let's look at communicate. In order to connect and be engaged, you need to be able to communicate effectively with your family. Imagine the impact of effective communication can have. You'll have better conflict resolution, less bickering, and deeper conversations. And outside the home, these skills will serve you and them in all aspects of your lives. One of the previous videos I mentioned about parents being teachers. Well, communication is one of the best things you can teach your kids. And there's no better way to do it than to live it. And as the saying goes, our actions scream so loud, our kids can't hear a word we're saying. That's why it's so important to walk the talk and to be that change. But there are different ways and purposes of communicating. To be able to communicate with the intent of creating a connection versus just communicating to get your thoughts or your opinions across, will have a big impact on your family. And as I mentioned before, that connection that you create with your children will have a greater influence than anything else you do for them. That's why it's important to be aware and consciously choose to communicate in a way that will serve everyone. See, the problem is that despite all the effort and love that we spend on our kids, we sometimes don't get that deep connection that we talked about in the first video because we're not communicating in order to get that connection. Most people communicate with their kids the way that they've been exposed to by their parents or others around them. Some are good role models of communication, and, well, others may not be such good role models. To some, good communication skills means to be able to effectively get your point across. But that's only half the battle. The important thing to remember is that by improving your communication skills, the relationship with your family, and others for that matter, will not only give you a more peaceful house, but it will also give you a great opportunity to teach your kids so that they too can become effective communicators. Being an effective communicator will, again, it builds self-esteem and also help your kids be successful in whatever they do. Just as we talked in the last video that being engaged is more than just engaging physically, likewise in communication, it needs to be not only done with our words, body language, and tone, but also with our eyes, our ears, our mind, and our heart. This is what will enable us to break through and communicate in a way that creates that strong bond that we so desire. When the communication is pretty much a one-way street, this is what leaves the kids feeling empty and insignificant. The communication tool I want to share with you is active listening. The first two tools are acknowledging and validating. These two powerful tools can really boost your communication with anyone, not just with your family. When I talk about acknowledging, I'm referring to a deep level of mirroring back or paraphrasing, which does a few things. One, it lets the other person know that you really listened. And two, when you do that, it lets them know that you care about what they say, which makes them feel significant. And thirdly, the other cool advantage is that they get to hear what they just said, which can be different from the messages that they wanted to get across, or may sound pretty different coming out of your mouth and not theirs. Think about it. What happens in an argument? The voices get louder and louder and louder. Why? Because we want to be heard. But by acknowledging, that eliminates that need because you've paraphrased back to them what they just said. It really helps take a lot of the tension out of the situation because the person feels respected, that you have listened to them and not just physically heard them. And also when you do this, they will be more apt to listen to you. So again, be that change. So here's some examples of phrases that you could use to acknowledge. So, what you're telling me is, or if I understand you correctly, or you could use something like, in other words. So basically, any phrases like these that gets the message across that, hey, this is what I heard. Those types of things will work. It kind of sets up the tone for the whole conversation. The other cool thing is that by doing this, it can also clear up any misunderstandings right away. So you're not wasting 5 or 10 minutes discussing something when your mind's on one aspect of it and their mind's on a different, and you're not on the same page. So by acknowledging right out of the gate, you can at least make sure you both are on the same page. Now, when you validate someone, you're letting them know that they have the right to feel the way that they do. You're validating their emotions. And it's important to remember that it's not judging whether they're right or wrong, nor is it agreeing or disagreeing with what they said. It's just letting them know that you can see things from their perspective. I mean, this has a big impact on adult conversations, so you can imagine what it would do for the kids. So here's some examples of how to validate. That's perfectly understandable that you feel that way. Or, it can be very upsetting when something like that happens. Or perhaps it's understandable you feel disappointed because you studied hard and you didn't get the grade you had hoped for. In this last example, you acknowledge and you validate. At the beginning, we validate it. It's understandable you feel disappointed. And then the second half of it is you're acknowledging that you listened to them because you know that they studied hard and they didn't get the grade they were hoping for. I had a client who shared that she used this with her son one time, and she had signed him up for some select soccer team, and he didn't like his coach and complained every day he had to go to practice until she's acknowledged and validating. After her son complained one day about his coach, she just told him, "Wow, I can see why you don't like going to practice. If he spends that much time yelling and screaming like a drill sergeant, that would stink." She said that was it. He just wanted to know that she understood his pain and what he was going through. And that's all it took. Another part of active listening is called empathetic listening. This is when you use your ears, your eyes, and your heart to pay attention to that tone of voice, the pace, the volume, and the flow of their words, not to mention their facial expression, their body language, and the feeling of where they are at emotionally. The goal here is to experience the situation from the other person's shoes. And once you do that, then you can speak to your child in a way that is appropriate for where they are emotionally. Learn to read the state of your child from an emotional standpoint and respond so that you can open up that connection. So if they're excited, be energetic. If they're scared, then create a feeling of safety by being reassuring. If they're angry or upset, this is when we have to be extra patient. And this can be really tough when they're angry or upset with you. If they're hyperactive, that's the time to be focused and calm. So to create a connection with your child, speak to them using kind and gentle words. Be non-judgmental and don't minimize or trivialize their thoughts or emotions because they're important to them. And really try hard to be extra considerate and patient with them. And it's, like I said, it's really tough, especially when the emotions start going and tempers flare. But to really be able to stop, catch yourself, and say, hold on, let me be the change. Let me be the one who's going to be more patient here. And use a loving and respectful tone. And that's really, really big for parents that are speaking to preteens or teenagers. By doing this, you will also build trust and respect. It creates a safe environment where the kids can feel good about sharing their thoughts and emotions. It enables them to release these emotions, which is so important because it's just not healthy for kids, or adults for that matter too, to keep trying to bury their emotions. It's kind of like trying to bury a worm. It's always going to find its way out. And when it comes to emotions, they typically find their way out in a way that's not very appropriate and acting out. Now I want to share a couple other tools with you to support your effective communication efforts. One is to use open-ended questions. Those questions that don't have a yes, no, or a single word answer. Using how, what, where will help draw more out of them, because I know, especially with boys, sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get information out of them. Some examples: instead of saying, "Did you have homework today?" you can ask them, "What homework do you have today?" Instead of saying, "Are you telling me the truth?" how truthful are you being right now? Instead of asking, "Are your chores done?" say, "What chores do you need to finish?" Instead of asking, "Do you need help?" ask them, "Where do you need help?" or "How can I help you?" One important thing to remember, though, is try to avoid asking why. Because the way society is, we're at a place where it's usually taken from a perspective of judgment, and that tends to get people to be defensive. So instead of saying, "Why did you do that?" ask them, "What would be some reasons you decided to do that?" Or, "What thoughts did you have before doing that?" And again, just come from a place of curiosity and not being judgmental, and that will really help keep the kids from putting the defensive up, and they'll open up more. The other tool I want to share with you is proactive conversations. So basically, when you start noticing that something's wrong, or perhaps they're being a little bit distant, don't wait for them to act out. Stop it there and find out what it is they're thinking or how they're feeling before they act out inappropriately. And if they're yelling at their sibling or hitting their sibling, try really hard to focus on what's going on inside of them first, versus correcting the behavior right away. And again, that's not saying that we don't correct the behavior, but really taking the effort to find out what they were thinking, what they were feeling before that, so that they can start thinking again in those terms and start recognizing things that, okay, this is what I thought last time before I did something and got in trouble. So again, just being more proactive. Because from a big picture standpoint, getting kids to be more aware of what they're thinking and feeling will help them so much so that they do start acting more appropriately. Because it's our thoughts that drive our feelings, that in turn drive our actions. And that's why we want to spend time and be aware and be conscious of what our thoughts are. So as a little recap, we discussed active listening through acknowledging, validating, and also talked about empathetic listening. And as you practice these techniques and utilize these tools, one really key point to remember is to seek first to understand rather than being understood. And taking that time to put yourself in the other person's shoes and really understand where they're coming from will be so effective in creating a better relationship, because you care so much to do that. But it'll also take care of whatever the individual situation that you're dealing with, because that really takes the tension out of it, because you're taking the time to understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling. So as you work through the CEC method of connect, engage, and communicate, again, I encourage you to be patient yet consistent. And if you find there's something that's getting in the way, well, when I check in with you in a few days, I'll let you know about how you can get some personal training to help you break through whatever is getting in your way from creating that solid relationship with your family. Again, I enjoyed sharing the CEC method with you, and I look forward to hearing from you about how these videos have impacted you and your family. Or again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks.